I would like to thank the AAMC for sponsoring this event. I'm a pre-therapy programming coordinator for the 12th Annual Pre-Medical and Pre-Health Professions National Conference. It is my honor to present to you Dr. Virginia Stoll, President of the American Occupational Therapy Association. Dr. Stoffel began her presidency in July 2013. She earned her PhD in leadership for the advancement of learning and service from the Cardinal Stritch University, her master's in educational psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and her bachelor's in occupational therapy from St. Catherine's. Aside from being president, she is also an associate professor in the Department of Occupational Science and Technology at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She has worked on numerous leadership and service projects with American Occupational Therapy Association and the American Occupational Therapy Foundation. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Virginia Stoffel.
Good morning, everybody. Really glad to be here. Being a Sunday morning and being a college campus, I'm actually amazed to see this many people in attendance, and so congratulations for taking charge of your everyday occupations. So as an occupational therapist, I want to give you a little bit sense of what occupational therapy is and does with people who are interested in managing their own health and well-being. So think about what you did from midnight until now. Okay, some of you might still have been up at midnight. You might have been out doing things with friends or family. You might have been sleeping. Sleep is an occupation. It's a restorative occupation. It's actually one of the most important occupations we engage in because it allows us to do all those other things during our waking hours. But truthfully, what you do from the time that you get up from that restorative occupation as you move throughout your day is a collection of a series of occupations: self-care, work, play, learning. All of those are occupations. And so we work with people who may have in the course of their life come upon an illness or an injury or some kind of an at-risk health condition. And we help them be reconnected to the things that they feel are most important in their lives, so their everyday occupational roles. Now, the American Occupational Therapy Association is an organization that has been in place almost 100 years. So as a profession, we've been around since 1917. And about 10 years ago, we engaged in a planning process at the association level to allow us to move forward to celebrate our 100th anniversary, but with far greater clarity about what our impact in the United States might be. And so this statement, we envision that occupational therapy is a powerful, widely recognized profession that's both science-driven and evidence-based, with a globally connected and diverse workforce that meets society's occupational needs. So, a very packed statement with lots of key words that really has given us direction to work together, both attracting people into the profession, and so hence my being here, given that you have such a diverse audience of potential students interested in health-related careers. And so that diverse workforce is a piece that our association works in conjunction with the programs across the country to be able to have well-qualified students who really can bring to our profession the vibrancy that makes occupational therapy a really exciting place to be. And you'll see a little bit more about that. Now, some of you may think, well, you know, being a practitioner is one thing, but I think I'd really like to be a scientist. I'd like to be a faculty member. I'd like to really advance what we know about humans and how it is that when they engage in meaningful everyday occupations, it impacts their state of health and well-being, not only at the personal level, but at the family level and the community level. And so if that's your interest, there's even greater need for you in our profession. And as I was introduced, my PhD came about long after I was an occupational therapist, when I recognized that we had a need that was even greater in the science end of things. So depending on what your interests are, I think you'll find that there's lots of great possibilities. So a little bit about occupational therapy practitioners, and that's a term we use to describe either of these two kinds of practitioners. The first being the occupational therapist. At this point in time, if you're interested in being an occupational therapist, you'll be getting either a master's or a doctoral professional degree. And we have about 114,000 of us here in the United States. And that's 114,000 of about 400,000, somewhere around there, worldwide. What the Bureau of Labor Statistics has anticipated is that the growth in the need for practitioners in our profession will go about 29% in this next decade, actually in the next 8 years. So as you'll see in a little bit, it has us on the top list. In fact, Forbes just came out with their top list yesterday. Physical therapy, who's following me, was number 3. Occupational therapy was number 4. And so continually you'll see lots of attention because of that 29% increase. Our aging population, our population of people who have long-term health conditions that are able to live with that. In fact, a newer population that we work with are cancer survivors because they are an increasingly growing population because of all the other advances in healthcare and medicine. Occupational therapy assistants attend community colleges and associate degree programs. And we have about 40,000 occupational therapy assistants in the current workforce. And I actually believe that this increase, 42.6%, is also linked to the Affordable Care Act because on the affordability end, if we're using people practicing at the top of their practice, it's a mix of OTs and OT assistants that create the right kind of team to be most efficient so as to be effective in our workforce. And then in the pipeline, we have at any point in time about 26,000 students. So altogether about 160, so anywhere between 160 to 180,000 of us here in the United States. What I want to do first, though, is to have you hear from real people who received our services as to what occupational therapy means to them, because I think that that's really where the validity in the whole process comes.
I'm just a guy that got wounded, and now, thanks to your profession, I can get through everyday life easier and just.
Is there 2 screens open? There you go. Thank you.
I'm just a guy that got wounded, and now, thanks to your profession, I can get through everyday life easier and just about like I used to before.
Occupational therapists, they're making a difference every single day. They're making lives better. They're changing the world for the better every single day.
It's not just a job. Like you're making our lives again.
Okay, so now how do we change back? Next slide.
Yeah, just slide into the, or I'll
Just head down. No. Thank you. We're gonna have another one very soon, so. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So let me just say a couple things about those 3 guys. 2 are retired Army sergeants. One is a Marine. I interviewed them as part of our opening ceremony at our national meeting in Baltimore earlier this year. I realized a few weeks later that I actually had more limbs than they do combined. Okay, Travis, the first person you saw, he is one of the 5 people in the United States who has survived a 4-limb loss as a result of an IED explosion. And Monty, the last person who spoke, he was actually part of the same troop. And 2 months after Travis lost his 4 limbs, Monty lost 3 of his 4. And of course, both received extensive services at Walter Reed Medical Center in Washington, D.C., and later were joined by Tim. These young men have experienced an amazing recovery process. And in fact, Travis said to me, he said, you know what, Ginny? I went from my wife having to do absolutely everything for me, every minute of the day. Yeah, between pain and confusion and some of the mental health recovery that also was a part of his process. He said, but today, all I need her to do is put my legs on. It takes her 2 minutes to put my legs on, and I can do everything else. And so the mastery that each of these folks has accomplished, of course, requires all sorts of intense practice and relearning and re-engagement and overcoming kind of the past thoughts about, well, what's my future look like? And instead, what they say is, we have a different future and we get to choose what we do, but that we regained our life through occupational therapy. So I want to show this next clip. It's actually designed by one of our new student leaders who has been in the profession, in her professional program for about 2 years. And she was part of an emerging leader development program. And created this videotape to really talk about the various ways that occupational therapists work across the lifespan. And this is the distinct value of occupational therapy. Thank you, and I'm really glad that website appears because that's a place where you can find all sorts of more information about our profession and where it is that you might actually find some academic programs. So just to give you a sense as to how many programs do we have across the country, I'm showing you this slide to see that we have just a small number of doctoral programs as well as many, many more master's level programs. On the other hand, if you look at the candidate and applicant status, which is about educational programs asking to be reviewed and developed towards that, you'll see that we're at 6 right now, but very soon could be at 19 programs in the country at the doctoral level. And we're at 147 right now, but again, very soon could be close to 170. On the OT assistance side of the picture, we currently have 179 programs accredited in the country, and again, very soon, as many as 228. In the world, we actually have the most programs, but soon will be eclipsed by Japan because they have one of the largest growing groups. This gives you a sense as to how many people apply to our programs. And like physical therapy, we have a centralized application process so that people can complete one application and apply to multiple programs. And that may well be why some of these numbers are so much higher than the number that actually get accepted. But you can see basically in this most recent 2013 year, that close to 7,000 of the about 35,000 students get accepted into those programs. So it's highly competitive, and of course, it really helps when people have exposure to the profession, can write about that with a real clarity about why this is a good match for them. So to do whatever you can to expose yourself. We also thought you might be interested in some of the ethnicity perspective, both from a perspective around Hispanic, as well as across all races. And so you can see why, as AOTA president, I want to do all that I can to be sure that our doors are wide open and welcoming to people from all sorts of diverse backgrounds. Occupational therapy has been always identified as a female-dominated profession, at least here in the United States. Actually, across the world, that's not necessarily the case. When I went to Uganda recently, I was interested to learn that only about 20% of their occupational therapists are female and about 80% male. So this gives you a picture as to where we are right now in terms of the kinds of programs and the male-female mix. So what does it take graduate-wise? These were actually lower than I expected them to be because I know my own program and what our mean GPA. But this gives you a sense as to those applicants part of that national system that ended up making the cut. And you'll find occupational therapy programs in a number of different ways packaged a bit differently. For example, at my university, we've had a BSMS program that allows people to move more quickly as opposed to a master's entry program where you come in with a previous baccalaureate degree and maybe 6 to 8 courses that are prereqs. We also increasingly are growing those OT doctoral degrees, and so you'll see both combined master's OTD and entry OTD. The slide. So the slide I'm missing actually was a compilation of the kinds of, since January of this year, the kinds of accolades that the profession has received in terms of the opportunities for jobs. And of course, what I always say is that in this field, if you enter the profession, you will often find the jobs are plentiful, but they're plentiful in different ways. They're plentiful in that you can find jobs in neonatal intensive care units and in birth to 3 programs. And then as you move, as people move towards the education system, many practitioners work in education systems. So they're not just in healthcare corporations per se, but they're in the community. They're where people live and learn and work and play. And for many of us, that actually is the reason why we love the profession so much, because as your life changes, so can the way you practice occupational therapy change. So hopefully I've given you just a taste of what this profession is like, and to know that students that are just, I just met with about 20 of them yesterday, students who are just entering now will be a part of that graduating class as we celebrate that centennial. And I think you'll see more and more occupational therapy being a part of the community, primary care, and in many ways, maybe in your own backyard where you never knew it. Thank you.